The night before Christmas in 1945 should have been filled with warmth, laughter, and the excitement of children waiting for morning gifts. Instead, in the small town of Fayetteville, it became the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt America for decades. Just after midnight, flames suddenly consumed the home of the Sodder family. Neighbors rushed outside as smoke swallowed the sky, while terrified screams echoed through the freezing winter air. By sunrise, the house was nothing but ashes. 5 of the Sodder children had vanished without a trace. George and Jenny Sodder were respected members of the community, raising 10 children while running a successful trucking business. But George carried enemies. Having fled Italy years earlier, he openly condemned fascist dictator Benito Mussolini and frequently argued with supporters of the regime living nearby. What once seemed like harmless political disputes soon felt far more sinister, especially after the mysterious fire that changed the Sodders' lives forever. Strangers had come to the house before, making odd remarks, and one man had even warned George that his home would one day go up in flames. At the time, it sounded like nothing more than an empty threat. On the night of December 24, the Sodder home was filled with laughter and excitement. The children were celebrating Christmas, opening gifts, and enjoying the warmth of family. As the evening wore on, George and Jenny decided to go to bed around 10 p.m., leaving some of the children still awake. 5 of them, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, remained upstairs, talking and playing long after midnight. Everything seemed normal, but shortly after 1 a.m., Jenny suddenly woke up. She smelled smoke. At first, it seemed faint, almost unnoticeable, but within moments it grew stronger. She got out of bed and realized the house was already on fire. Panic spread instantly. Flames were moving quickly, far faster than anyone expected. George and Jenny rushed to wake their children. They managed to gather 4 of them and escape outside into the freezing night. But the 5 children upstairs were trapped. George refused to accept it. He ran back toward the house, determined to save them. His plan was simple: grab the ladder from the side of the house, climb up to the window, and bring the children down one by one. But when he reached the usual spot, the ladder was gone. Confused and desperate, he changed plans. He ran to his trucks, thinking he could drive one close to the house and climb onto the roof. But when he tried to start them, both vehicles failed. They had been working perfectly earlier that day, yet now they refused to turn over. Every second mattered. The fire was growing uncontrollably, devouring the house in a way that felt almost unnatural. George could do nothing but watch as the flames consumed everything. Within less than an hour, the home collapsed into a pile of burning debris. The 5 children were never seen again. The next morning, investigators arrived at the scene. The official conclusion came quickly. The fire was an accident, likely caused by faulty wiring, and the 5 missing children had perished in the flames. But almost immediately, things didn't add up. As workers sifted through the ashes, they expected to find remains, bones, fragments, anything that would confirm the children had died there. Instead, they found nothing. No skulls, no teeth, no identifiable human remains of any kind. Authorities claimed that the fire had been so intense that it completely cremated the bodies, but this explanation raised serious doubts. Experts later pointed out that house fires typically do not burn hot enough to destroy human skeletons. Even in professional cremation settings, bones are left behind and must be processed further. The Sodder family refused to accept the official explanation. To them, it was impossible. They began to believe that their children had not died in the fire at all, that they had been taken. As time passed, more strange details began to surface. A witness came forward claiming they had seen a man near the Sodder home on the night of the fire, throwing what appeared to be a flaming object onto the roof. Another person reported seeing someone tampering with the family's electrical system days before the incident. The phone line, which George had attempted to use to call for help, was later discovered to have been cut, not damaged by fire, but physically severed. Then there was the missing ladder, which mysteriously reappeared days later in a nearby ditch. Each new detail made the situation more disturbing. And then came the sightings. In the weeks following the fire, multiple people claimed to have seen children matching the descriptions of the missing Sodder kids. One woman insisted she had seen them the very next morning, sitting in a car with unfamiliar adults. Another claimed she had served them breakfast at a roadside establishment. noting that the group included 2 men and 2 women who spoke Italian. These reports were never confirmed, but they were consistent enough to raise serious questions. Years later, the case took another shocking turn. The Sodder family received a photograph in the mail. It showed a young man, possibly in his 22nd, who bore a striking resemblance to Louis, one of the missing children. On the back of the photograph was a cryptic message: Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie. The family was convinced it was him. They launched their own investigation, hiring private detectives and chasing leads across the country. They even erected a large billboard along a highway, displaying the faces of the missing children and offering a reward for any information. But no definitive answers ever came. Theories began to spread. Some believed the children had been kidnapped as part of a targeted attack against George, possibly due to his outspoken views about Benito Mussolini. Others suggested organized crime involvement, or even human trafficking. There were also those who still believed it was a tragic accident, arguing that the fire had somehow destroyed all evidence despite the inconsistencies. But the Sodder family never believed the official explanation. To them, the idea that 5 children could simply vanish in a house fire without a single trace felt impossible. It wasn't just grief that drove them, it was a deep, unshakable sense that something was terribly wrong. Jenny Sodder carried that belief for the rest of her life. She wore black every day, not only as a symbol of mourning, but as a quiet statement that her children were never truly laid to rest. In her heart, they were still out there somewhere alive, waiting to be found. Her sorrow was not one of closure, but of endless uncertainty. George Sodder refused to stop searching. He followed leads, spoke to witnesses, and chased even the smallest clues across states and years. No matter how much time passed, he never accepted that the fire had taken his children. For him, the absence of evidence was not proof of death, it was proof that the truth had been hidden. The billboard they placed along the highway stood for decades, showing the faces of the missing children to anyone who passed by. It became more than just a sign, it was a symbol of persistence, of a family unwilling to let the world forget. While others moved on, the Sodders held on to hope. Even today, the mystery remains unsolved. No confirmed remains were ever found. Even today, the mystery of the Sodder children remains unsolved. More than 80 years have passed since the Christmas Eve fire, yet the questions surrounding it refuse to disappear. No confirmed remains were ever recovered from the ashes, and no explanation has fully accounted for the strange events linked to that night. Instead, the case survives through a collection of clues, a phone line that appeared to have been cut, a ladder that vanished when it was desperately needed, reports from witnesses who claimed to have seen the children after the fire, and a photograph mailed to the family years later that seemed to show one of the missing children alive. For George and Jenny Sodder, these details were impossible to dismiss. They believed the fire was only part of a larger story, one that investigators never uncovered. While officials concluded that the children had died in the blaze, the Sodders spent the rest of their lives searching for answers and holding on to hope. But what happened that night in Fayetteville? Was it a tragic accident made stranger by coincidence, or was it something far more deliberate? Could 5 children truly have perished without leaving a trace, or were they taken away during the chaos of the fire? Decades later, no one can say with certainty. As the years turned into decades, the trail grew colder. Documents disappeared, witnesses passed away, and the house that once stood at the center of the mystery became little more than a memory. Yet the questions never disappeared. What happened to the 5 Sodder children remains one of the most baffling unsolved cases in American history. Perhaps the truth was buried long ago with evidence that was overlooked or lost. Or perhaps someone, somewhere, carried the secret for the rest of their life and never spoke a word. The fire may have destroyed a home, but it never erased the doubts that followed. For generations, people have examined the clues, debated the theories, and searched for answers that never came. Every strange detail seems to point in a different direction, making the mystery even harder to unravel. In the end, the Sodder case is more than a story about a fire. It is a story about uncertainty, hope, and a family's refusal to stop believing. Until undeniable evidence emerges, the fate of the 5 missing children will remain unknown, a haunting chapter of history that continues to captivate and disturb those who encounter it.